Could you please pronounce your name correctly for me?
Gayle Tustin.
And as you know, because you've listened to the podcast, my general next question is, how did you become creative in the first place? So was it parents? Were some youthful experiences? So what led you down this path?
I think for me it was an escape because my father left home when I was 9 months old. And so I grew up with a single parent, and my sister was 4 years older. And so I started cutting and pasting. This is kind of my first memories. Is there was this kind of yellowy manila paper that there used to be scrapbooks, and I used to cut up magazines and wallpaper books, and I had a lot of them, but my mother got rid of them. I don't know whatever happened to them when we moved. So that was my first. It was an escape because my mom was depressed. So.
But wallpaper books, did your mother...
Well, cut out, I'd cut little figures and make the...
Well, but not everybody has wallpaper books laying around. That's why I'm sort of...
Someone gave them to her because we weren't wallpapering. I know that. We were in a small apartment. And the little fold-out dolls, you fold the paper and cut them out, and then they'd be holding hands. I used to love to do that.
Now, where was this? Where'd you grow up?
Newcastle, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
For 7 years, and then Sharpsville, Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh, western PA.
Okay. And so now you work, you're known primarily as a ceramicist. I'm saying this tentatively because I want to make sure that basically...
Yes, that's right.
You define it.
I don't say potter.
Yeah, that's the sort of the question, what he would like to be called, basically. So ceramicist, but you also do two-dimensional paintings and other sorts of things. Since you work in multiple mediums, what do you like to be known for?
I just call myself an artist, and that just changes. It depends what I'm working on. So right now, finishing up a commission, but I'm also doing small ceramic objects, and I'm working on a plan for installation pieces with my large tarps that I'm painting and collaging on, and my dress forms. So I've got probably 4 of them figured out, and so I think I'm going to have to sort of rent a space with good lights. And that's the direction my art's going. I think it has to do with things that I collect.
Well, and that's something that comes up quite frequently, which is the discussion of artists having to store stuff. I know we're sitting here in your studio, and I know that your loft is mostly storage, and the storage rack over here is also storage. Do you have a storage unit, or?
I don't.
Okay.
I've talked about it. I've talked even with artist friends about let's do this or else have a big giant sale, but then basically you end up giving your work away, and I'm not ready to do that.
No, none of us are ever ready to do that. But it's hard. I mean, the issue of basically how much do you produce? How large scale is it? Because if you can't have it on exhibition or have it in a gallery or have it sold, it ends up being in storage.
That's right.
So do you take that into consideration? Because your work is specifically, I'm thinking the ceramic work is reasonably fragile. So you have to put a little extra added layer of protection when you have to keep it in storage, and or even when you have to ship it or anything like this.
Yes, shipping is really a pain for ceramic work, but I think for storage I would be storing my paintings. I've tried to devise different ways to store things. For example, I've been working on loose canvas, unstretched canvas, which I really like. I'll sew the edges and put hanging corners on them. And so I devised this PVC pipe that I can just drape them over, and then I have a sailing pulley system so I can lower them down. And
you do know nobody can see this. This is an audio podcast.
Yes, I do know that.
Okay, just making clear. But you described it pretty well. This is pretty good. What about shipping? Something I always wonder about, specifically. So shipping is a bitch for you because, for me, it's easy.
So I don't do it that much. I've in different times in my life, I've had numerous galleries. Let's say probably the most I've been with at one time is a half a dozen. And they've all been basically, I could drive to them. So I had kind of decided a while back I was not going to try to go on the other side of the Mississippi, just because it's just too far. Even when I would apply for shows and exhibitions, I would just make sure they were a little more local or no farther than Pennsylvania kind of thing.
Okay, so you mentioned galleries. So you've been in many galleries, it sounds like, over the course of your career. Did you choose them? Did they choose you? How did you make these relationships?
I think initially it started out that I sought out galleries, would put together a proposal and make an appointment. I would not do a cold call and go in but first I would investigate the gallery because your work just doesn't fit in any gallery. You know, I'd go somewhere, let's like say New Bern. I had 2 different galleries at different times in New Bern. And one, my work fit in great. And I feel like if your work fits in, it's going to sell. If your work doesn't fit in somewhere, then the wrong person's going to go in there for you.
Okay, now I've had this in my mind. I rattle around these different philosophies of this. When you're looking at a gallery, are you looking at, like, okay, when I look at a gallery and I'm thinking, oh, my work would fit beautifully here, I'm noticing that my work sort of fills a niche that they don't currently have in their roster. But I know there's also the other way of doing it, which is basically finding artists who work like you. And so you're sort of in a group of similar mediums or similar subject matters or whatever kind of thing. So like, which way do you look when you're looking at a gallery?
More that my work fits in, not is my work similar to other work in there, because I still do ceramic wall sculpture, and I have not really found anybody doing quite the same kind of thing. That large ceramic tiles, the largest I can get in my kiln is 23 by 23 inches. So a lot of times I'll cut them like stained glass and hang them. And so it's like a painting, but it's in relief in clay. And I would look at the other paintings and maybe the pottery, other ceramic work in there, and see how my work looked with it. Because I'm not a realist, I'm not a landscape painter, so I just have found galleries that lean more towards that. They're not for me. I mean, I wish that more people would come to me. You know, fortunately, the representation I have now, the gallerist came to me and, you know, wanted to show my ceramic vessel sculpture. And it was a success, you know, quite a few pieces sold, and she's a good promoter, and it fit with the other work.
Right. Okay. So going through your sort of history of experiences with galleries and gallerists, what kind of things sort of were red flags that said this was not going to work? Or what were some really great characteristics of a gallery or the people running the gallery that made you say, this is really going well?
I think that the more unusual the art was, I felt like I could fit in. Just back to realism and landscape painting and portraiture, my work just doesn't fit in there. And I've gone to galleries and been turned away too because they didn't want to hang ceramic on the wall. They wanted to put it on a pedestal. And then they were like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. Well, clay's heavy. It's not like I'm doing thin porcelain tiles. All you need is a 50-pound hanger and it's fine, but that would scare people away. There was, I'm kind of getting off track here, but there was an exhibition at the Cameron Art Museum with Viola Fry. And I got the postcard in the mail, and it was like, oh my gosh, Viola Fry. And she is deceased now, an incredible artist, but she did these giant figurative works that got pieced together. So I called up the museum. I said, please, you know, I would like to help you put these together. And it just was an amazing experience. It made my work seem like a teacup or something compared to each element that got bolted together for her pieces.
Oh yeah, these are monumental
Yes.
sculptures made of like pieces put together. I'm assuming probably because of size of kilns, basically. Like,
Yes, and just the weight of them, and traveling too. So
yeah, those would be quite outrageous.
yeah. So versus where if it was metal or something, you could make it in a larger piece and wouldn't have to worry so much about transport and breakage.
Okay, now have you had any bad experiences with galleries?
Yes, I have had bad experiences with galleries, and mainly discounting my work unbeknownst to me. And then you get a check in the mail and it's like, wait a minute. And then, oh, we're so sorry. We just thought we could give this person a discount. And it wasn't like the person ever, bought anything of mine before. I can see if it's a repeat person coming in there, and there wasn't in the contract. So I did have a falling out with one gallery, and it was just like I just pulled my work out. It's like, this isn't even worth it, if they don't understand my side. So, and damage, not too bad a damage, things that I could repair, but shoving things in corners and behind doors, and you go in and you have your list of where the work is, and it takes them a while to find it, and it's like, okay, I'm done with this gallery too, because there's no respect sometimes.
I get the same thing. I mean, they damage my frames and stuff like that. I mean, it's
Frames
very
are
rarely
terrible.
for me, it's very rarely the work itself that's damaged, but the frames, boy, a lot of galleries do not treat frames very well. They think they're just like carrying containers, basically.
Right. Well, I had one gallery and I had some ceramic wall pieces, and there were 4 individual ones. Each one was about the size of about 4 regular clay bricks, but it was carved out, and they broke like 4 out of 6. I think there were 6 of them, and then they threw the pieces away. I was like, wait a minute, what? A lot of stuff I can repair. I've got like my little systems. I use PC7s, one of my favorite 2-part epoxy glues, and you can sand it and paint it, and nobody knows. But that was a little disrespectful. I'm sorry. It wasn't like shattered or something. Oh, it was in so many pieces, but
Did they at least pay you your?
they did pay me.
Okay, so that's something.
Yeah, they did pay me.
All right, that's fair.
So
Now, you also were part of No Boundaries.
that's right.
So tell me a little bit about your involvement in No Boundaries, which is an artist colony, which might be want to rename itself Artist Residency because colony is a bit dated. And then on top of that, also residencies in general. Have you done any of your own artwork sort of going off throughout the world?
Yes. So first, No Boundaries. Pam told Dick Roberts and I started that in 1998 was our first colony. And what happened was, as you know, Pam Toll went to Macedonia in 1994, and she came back really a changed person and just full of this new energy. And it was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. So the next year they said, bring another artist. Well, hello, I didn't even have to apply. And I wasn't even painting then. That kind of is what got me painting. I was working in clay and doing my wall sculpture and relief. And so, boy, I was pretty nervous. I'm going to go work with these painters from all over the world. And it was in Macedonia, and at the time they were known as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, right when Yugoslavia broke up. And while I was there, it's like September 1995, they were recognized as their own country. And they were so excited, they shot guns off the balcony of this monastery, celebrating and drinking lots of rakia.
As one does at a monastery.
Yes, yeah, there, of course, there you go. There was this passion that I have not ever seen in the United States for art. Not afraid to show your passion to one another, like men dancing together and, that and walking arm in arm. It was like, wow, you just don't do this in the United States. Or I just noticed it more with the men. They were just more flamboyant and not afraid of their femininity. That You just see more in this country. So then they found out I did clay, and so I was invited back the next year in '96, and I went to a colony on Lake Prespa. And that year, Dick went with Pam back to the monastery at St. Yoakimas Ogasi in the Ogoski Mountains on the Albanian-Bulgarian border. So Macedonia's a little landlocked country. And so after Dick went, he's all juiced up about all this too, and we're like, we need to do this. Let's do it. So we formed a nonprofit, and the first colony was in 1998, and it really changed our lives. When I was on the plane coming back from Macedonia the first time in '95, I really felt like, okay, I lived. I can die, and I'm satisfied with all my life experiences. It was that enriching.
And have you done any other residencies since then?
I have Sayanoja in northern Spain, and also a few Paint a Future, which there's a number of us around here that have done that. And one was in South Africa, in Plettenberg, South Africa. Another was in Brazil, Florianopolis, Brazil, and Arpoint Gumno, which Sergei Andreski started, a couple residencies there and a reunion there. And that's all I can think of right now.
Well, the big question for me, I don't think I've ever done like a formal residency. I've done things similar to residencies. But so the question is sort of like, are they really as beneficial as some people think they are? Like some people swear by residencies, and some people don't get as much out of them. So like, what is your experiences with doing residencies?
They changed my life. Like really, they changed my life. I hadn't traveled that much abroad. I had been abroad before, but you just really get to know people from different cultures, and even if you can't speak the same language, you're able to share so much through your art. It's just really so opening. It just kind of opens your soul to understanding more about the world. And I would go back and do a residency again, but at this stage in my life, I would be really picky because some of them are a little more rustic and primitive, and I don't mind that, but it's not so easy being in my 60s now. So, but I highly recommend it. I have not been to residencies in the United States. I just started investigating that because I know a lot of the state parks have residencies, and I have a little more freedom now, so I could be able to do that.
Well, actually, let's go back a little bit of a step on this. You went to school. You never mentioned sort of where any education you got. What kind of education? Was it an arts education or some other education? What did you do?
Well, I think I have the record of all my friends of attending the most universities and colleges. So I started out in...
I did 4.
I did 10.
Okay, yeah, you beat me.
So I started out in business school because it was my parents. You have to get a job. You're not going to art school. I actually wanted to go into fashion design. So you have to get at least a 2-year degree so you can basically be a secretary, so you know that you have money on the table. And that was a big thing with my mother since she was a single parent for so long. And that was really hard for her. And so I started out at Robert Morris University in Coraopolis, Pennsylvania, right outside Pittsburgh.
I've heard of none of those things or places, but go on.
Well, it's a business school.
And that's why I don't know it.
I got a 2-year degree from there. And then I wanted to go to fashion design school. So I applied back up my first semester at Robert Morris. I got accepted to Arizona University, and they had a really good fashion design and merchandising program. I went home with the paperwork and said, look, I got into this. This is what I want to do. And my parents said, well, good luck, goodbye, And then I was just too insecure to get a job and try to put myself through school. So I finished out my associate degree at Robert Morris, and then I started taking night classes. So I was interested in clay, and my first pottery class was at Allegheny Community College outside of Pittsburgh. And then I took a sculpture class at the University of Pittsburgh. And then I lived in Tennessee for a while, and I took printmaking at Union University. And then I started wanting to fill in the blanks, and I took some health and nutrition classes just to get credits at Jackson State. And then I went to Penn State. Penn State really changed me, Penn State University Park. And that was a big foundation for my clay. David Dontigny, Jim Stevenson, Joe Havel, some just really great professors there. And then I moved, and I'm not sure how many we're up to, but when I moved to Wilmington, then I'm floundering again, and I decided I wanted to go into jewelry, but I had to go travel all the way to ECU, so it's like, okay, I can't do that. I'm just going to get my bachelor's degree in fine art and just see where it goes from there. So I took photography at Cape Fear Community College, and then I did 2 semesters, one through the University of Tennessee at Arrowmount, and I got credit there. That was clay classes with Pete Pinnell and Linda Arbuckle. Excellent time. And then Alfred University in Alfred, New York, which is the renowned ceramic school in the sciences and in the art. And then I got my degree from UNCW, and I actually was the first student to graduate with honors there. Only because a friend of mine in the English department knew I was in school, and she said, "You are going to do the honors project, aren't you?" And I didn't even know what it was. And as long as your grade point average, I think, was 3.2, you could do an honors project. But no one had ever done it in the art department. So I paved the road for that and graduated with honors.
No, so you started off as business school, and then you ended up in the arts. Did taking those business classes and all that, do you feel that that's in any way sort of benefited you with your art practice? Because as a teacher, one of my big pet peeves about modern academic art education is that we teach too much about technique, practice, philosophy, and not enough about basically how to make money doing it, how to make a living from it, whatever that means. So whether it's grants, residencies, sales, whatever, we don't teach that. So did that education help you, or did it impact you in any way?
I don't think it helped me be like a salesperson or like how to make a living, but there were basics like accounting and things like that.
Taxes,
business
contract
math,
law.
yeah. Yes,
How to
which
do
now
an
I
Excel
hate.
spreadsheet.
I hate doing my taxes. Of course, who likes doing taxes? But
I pay somebody else to do my taxes. I
yeah,
refuse.
well, I do. I get it all together, and then it's here.
My taxes are super easy, so I'm not too concerned about it.
But it was the education at the time was executive secretarial, and so I had shorthand and business math, and I started working for Hertz Rent-A-Car, and then I got a really good job at Price Waterhouse, one of the big 8 accounting firms downtown Pittsburgh, and they wanted me to move up and be the vice president's secretary, and that's when I decided I can't do this. I'll be in this the rest of my life. And I was taking art classes at night, so I kind of closed everything up and moved to Martha's Vineyard and was looking for an apprenticeship with a potter, but that didn't happen.
Okay, but so this sort of comes to like one of my big questions, of course, is like, have you had over the course of your life had to do what I define as like side hustles, like other jobs in order to make ends meet, or have you been primarily either like doing workshops or teaching or selling, or so like how have you been able to sort of work together an income?
No, I had to do side jobs. When I was at Penn State, I met a woman in the art studios, and she was in graduate school for arts education, and we were both doing kind of tile work. So we had talked about, let's start a tile business. So I moved to the Poconos in 19 1982, the summer of 1982, and we started a tile business. It was called Tustin Studios. And so it took us a while to get on our feet. So, yeah, I was waiting tables at Floyd's Restaurant, downtown Stroudsburg on Main Street, that kind of thing. I've done my share of waiting tables.
Okay. Now, along that line, though, so have you ever applied for any grants or anything like this?
I have. I got an emerging artist grant from the Arts Council in Wilmington in 1991 and bought this slab roller. So, and I didn't even get what I asked for. It didn't pay for the slab roller, but it was just so much work for $800 or something.
I'm surprised it was 800. I would have said less than 500.
No.
Yeah, well, and that's one of my rubs about sort of the whole grant system is that oftentimes it's more work than the amount of money that they're giving you between the paperwork to apply, but then also the paperwork to, sort of rectify it at the end, give the justifications and all this.
Right. I mean, well, we certainly found that out with No Boundaries too, that, we were trying to make our project what the grant wanted, and then we just decided this isn't going to work. So we went knocking on doors for sponsorships instead.
Sometimes it's easier that way. Mm-hmm. Along that, one thing that so I know you personally because we've been run in the same circles throughout Wilmington for many years. I don't think I've ever sort of sat down and sort of investigated your work. So do you write artist statements and have great things in text form to describe what you produce, or do you leave that sort of vague and open to interpretation?
I do. I have artist statements and I have bios. I really hate writing them, but I do when it's called for. And something I do is I have so many sketchbooks and notebooks around. It's sort of like whichever one is closest I pick up. So they're not in order by date, that's for sure. And so when I'm working, a lot of times I'll write down what's in my head. I might get I think, oh, this is a profound statement about what I'm thinking about while I'm working. And I do that with titles too. When I work on pieces, my process is long. I don't sit down and make a piece of work in one day, whether it's painting, collage, or clay work. So I'll keep a note card or a notebook, and I might have at least a dozen titles in the process. And then the final title is what it ends up being because it just changes. I jump around.
I find titles to be really difficult because I find that they either are too vague and too abstract, or they're incredibly esoteric and pompous. And for me, I find it very difficult to find the right title because I either go too simple or I go way too intellectual.
Right.
And finding that right balance because I do portfolio reviews online, and a lot of times they have titles with their works, and I find that a lot of times the titles can be very distracting.
I agree.
From sort of engaging with it. So trying to be able to balance that sort of the right title to get people engaged without turning them off or turning them away from it is a very difficult line to balance.
Well, when I was working more abstract, my work, there's, expressionistic, more so things appear in it, and I used to try to make them go away. I don't do that so much now. But there was a point when I was working abstract, I would just pick up a freaking dictionary or a book. I didn't know, and close my eyes and open a page and point to a word. I thought, oh, that works. There's my title, which is a little ridiculous, but that's how meaningful titles were to me too.
It was interesting because there was a time when titles were not very important. I remember this where people just didn't care about titles.
Right.
And a lot of times people were untitled number 93, whatever. People just didn't care about them. They weren't.
Right.
But I feel like they've become more important again. I get a lot of people asking about titles and really trying hard to come up with good titles, evocative titles.
Well, That's why I guess I started writing down, everything that was coming into my mind while I was working on it. And that's helped me. And then it's fun to go back, and I'll usually, just tape those in my sketchbooks while it's about the piece I'm working on. And it's fun to go back and look at that.
Okay, along that line, when you're making work, are you intentionally creating a body of work, or are you just making a single piece at a time and then it happens to become a body of work over time?
Pretty much both.
It can't be both. Choose one or the other.
Okay, so
I'm kidding.
But I jump around. So I'm working now on a body of work with boxes, and I'm making ceramic elements, and almost like Cornell. That is very inspiring to me, but these have little feet, and now they're kind of turning into houses. So I am working on a series of those, but I might work on one and then come in my studio the next day and something catches my eye, and the next thing I know, I'm painting on a tarp or cutting up fabric to glue on something or so.
How many pieces of whatever medium you're working in do you have going at any given moment?
How, like, total?
Sure.
Oh, my gosh. 30.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like
I've got like 6 or 7 going at any given time, but
right.
I find that a lot of that has to do with basically the sheer space you have in your studio.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have a very spacious studio with lots of surfaces, so you can have lots of different things going on. Like I have a smaller studio, so I'm limited by the space in my studio as far as how many I can have going. So you actually have 30 pieces going at any given time?
I guess I say that because sometimes things are just sometimes never finished. They're just never finished unless there's a show and you've got to push it out the door. And so I guess that's why I say that, because some things I get stuck, and I don't want to go too far. We've all done that. You go too far and you ruin a piece.
I always
And
overwork.
so I'm pretty good about putting it away. And like, seriously, sometimes I've put stuff away for a year or more. And then it'll hit me, this is what this piece needs. So I feel fortunate that I can do that. I don't know, I blame a lot on me being a Gemini. I have multiple personalities, and I just like too many things. I'm so interested in so many things. I have to like limit myself. Like a friend of mine wanted to do encaustic. And I've played around with encaustic before, and I thought, I have some pieces. I just want to, touch on the encaustic. So have my studios turned over to encaustic. And then it's like, no, I can't do this. I'll just do a dash here and there, but it's one more thing. I'm in too many things.
Oh, I love materials. I'm personally right now playing with encaustic. I'm playing with paraffin wax. I'm playing with pastels. I'm playing with all kinds of things that
That's
probably
great.
will never see the light of day. But
I get it.
Part of the fun of it is just trying some things and seeing what they do.
Right.
You know.
Well, I try not to let go of playing in my work. I do commissions too, and there's only a limited amount of play you can do with commissions. And I have a clause in my contract that I can make changes if I see that it will, aesthetically raise the work to another level. So I'm not stuck in my drawing, because what I have found that if you try to reproduce a drawing, it just is too stiff when I try to do it on a larger scale. So I try to put the smaller piece away and just from memory bring it to someplace else.
The most shocking part of that statement was that you have a contract. So like you have a pre-existing contract for commissions that you just sort of pull out?
Well, I didn't make it up. I used somebody's as a model. I forget, this is years ago. You might have even been here. Somebody came to town and she was about how to promote your art. I think the Arts Council did it or something. And so we had some, blanket kind of contracts that I, just changed how it would suit me. So
I have no
If you
such
want a
contract,
copy, I'll
yeah.
let you. I'll give you a copy.
Oh no, I hate commissions. No, I've done like 3 commissions in my entire life, and I hated every single one of them. They were painful to produce, and I'm embarrassed by them. One of them's down at PPD actually. So like, yeah, I'm just, I hate doing them with such a passion. It's in the same way. I was a photographer, like a straight photographer for many, many years, and people would always ask me to do weddings. And I did a wedding one time in my career, and it was the worst photographic experience I've ever had in my entire life. The clients were perfectly happy, but I hated it so much. Like the whole act of doing it was just horrible. I didn't sleep for days ahead of time. Like I was so concerned and so afraid of everything going wrong, and because they were paying me, it was a commission basically, and I didn't get into the creative industries to have that kind of stress.
Right. Of course.
So I refuse. I did that one wedding one time, and I've never done one since, and I will not do anything like that again.
Right. Well, I did a lot of work for hospice over years for commissions for them, and that ended up being okay.
I was going to say that's a little different. I mean, doing it for a charitable organization, that's a little different than like somebody asking for a pet portrait or something. Like,
no, I won't do that.
well, to me, that when I hear commission, I think pet portraits.
Right. Well, there are plenty of people that are much better at that than me.
There are. In your career, have you done workshops and any other kinds of sort of teaching method type of things?
Yes, I have. I've worked with children quite a bit, and the last workshop I did was a narrative vessel building workshop at the Cameron Art Museum. What I learned from that, it was successful. I was really happy with how people's work came out, but it was over 3 weekends, and that was a little hard, and also lugging clay over there. So next time I decide to do that, I'll do it in my studio. I'll just move everything around because it's heavy lifting 50-pound boxes of clay around. And then I was using their kilns to fire, so I kind of had to hang around a little more than what I wanted to and babysit the kilns. So
sure, it's not your home kiln.
No.
Like you don't know its little nuances.
No.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Okay. I've got a couple more things that I sort of want to touch on because I take notes while I'm listening to you. At one point you talked about children. One question I often have about, probably because like I'm planning on having children with my wife in the near future.
That's great.
And so I'm interested in like, how does having children affect either your art practice or your general life, and how you sort of structure everything around when children enter your life?
Well, I have one daughter, and I just really loved being a parent. It changed my life, and I think everybody should be a parent. Maybe not really, but you certainly learn a lot more when you have kids. So, of course, family is a priority. So that always came first, but I made the time to get in my studio. Pretty much would take my daughter to school early, and I'd be just right in the studio and made sure I had about 4 hours of time. And then I had workshops with kids, and that was really fun. And it's inspiring just because, you think you're playful, and then you get around kids and they're doing art, and it just opens up a whole new door. I've bartered doing things with kids at the Alice Higgins Montessori School, which is not in there anymore, but the mural's still up. It's 22 feet high by 15 feet wide, and we did a clay quilt in there. And then my daughter went to St. Mary's, and I bartered doing murals with kids. They did tiles of what they were thankful for, and then I designed these stained glass looking windows.
Wait, I'm sorry. Let me get this clear. You bartered for your children's education?
Yes, I did.
Excellent.
Yes.
I thoroughly admire that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It worked.
It's great. I would
It was
love
win-win.
to barter for things like this.
Yeah, it was a win-win.
I want to find somebody that will let me barter for my mortgage.
Well, maybe.
Some developer or whatever that will let me trade artwork for my mortgage. That would
Yeah,
be
I try to
amazing.
barter. I'm shy about it sometimes. I wish my dentist would barter and things like that.
That'd be great.
But it's usually like, oh, we we have too much hanging around here already, and it's usually like bad looking stuff, and it's like it's not worth the
Oh,
aggravation.
I had a doctor when I was a kid that had a scale sarcophagus of Tutankhamun in the waiting room. Weirdest doctor I've ever had in my life. Great fun. Worst taste in art. He's no longer a doctor though, but that's a long story. Anyways, but so like a lot of people talk about how like having children like took away from their, or as you're saying, sort of added to their artistic practice and stuff. So was it anything that sort of you feel like had an impact, either positive or negative, on your career?
I think it was positive because I did become more playful, and my daughter inspired me. My daughter's not an artist; she's a physician's assistant, because she told me one time a long time ago when I opened up the kiln when it was in my garage studio and it was a disaster and I'm sitting on the floor crying and she comes down and she said that's when she decided I'm not being an artist. I've got to make more money and be able to play more. But my daughter has even worked for me when I've had some projects and needed help, and I mean, we're close, we're really good buddies, especially now since she's in her 30s. We're really good friends. But she had her daughter here because her husband was in Bahrain with the Coast Guard. So she lived with me and I got to be here to catch the baby. So when my granddaughter was here, we had a pack and play in the studio, and Jerry would come out here, that's my daughter, and help me, and we'd put all these postcards around my granddaughter's crib. And I think I did more with my granddaughter, who's only 6 now, than with my daughter. And she is an incredible little artist, so much more than my daughter. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but it's
skips
inspiring.
generation sometimes. Yeah. Children often are either exactly like their parents or the opposite of their parents. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, it's pretty common. Now, you mentioned also like that you would drop your kid off at school and then you would put in a good 4 hours in the studio. I find that a lot of artists are one of two things. Now, I could be totally wrong on this, but this is my perception, is that artists are either the kind of artists that basically wait to be inspired before they go into the studio, or the kind of people that they go into the studio every day like it's a job from 9 to 5 or whatever their time frame is, and they have to be there regardless of whether they're inspired or not. Which do you fall into one of those categories?
I find that if I set so many hours a day to be in my studio, I'm much better, because my studio's behind my house. It's attached by the roof. There is a breezeway, but still you're close to home. So when I go to my studio, it's like, okay, I'll go in the house for lunch, but because I used to walk in there, it's like, oh, there's laundry, oh, there's dishes, and it would like totally distract me. And the next thing I know, my family'd be coming home and I'd have to make dinner. So if I like even now, I'm not a morning person. I've never been, like, except when I had to take my daughter to school early and get me in the studio. I like to be in the studio at 12, but I'm in the studio by 2:00, and I'm a late night worker, so I'll take a late lunch and then I'll work till 9 or 10 at night. And sometimes my best time to work is 6 to 10.
Okay.
Sorry, my dog was distracting me.
It's okay. Dogs have a habit of doing that.
My Betty.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Last sort of like question that was rattling in my brain before I even came here was from our last meeting, our last conversation over dinner. You were talking about how you already have some of your paperwork and stuff at the university library. And so I'm starting to think, because I'm having some family issues with loss and people passing and things like this, about what a previous guest had talked to me about. Amy Pottsick was talking about estate planning for artists, and how a lot of us make the mistake of not, in advance of us passing, thinking about how our stuff will be scholarly used, you put it in as research in university libraries, this kind of stuff. So like, is this something that you have consciously thought about to try and do, or did it just fall in your lap?
What happened was, when I was doing the honors project, I did a lot of research on something that I fell in love with, which was Terra sigillata. And what that means is earth seal. So you separate the finest particles out of clay and you paint that on. I add oxides to it and burnish it. But I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tiles. I have a whole library of tiles and research notes and my glaze technology research. So when I did that honors project, it was shortly after that they asked if they could archive my working papers. So they have some stuff over there, but I'm not rushing to send a lot of stuff over there because it's reference for me. I go back, and so I'm very happy that my stuff isn't just going to go on the side of the road, all my research and my tests.
Well, but that then leads to the question of like, you have a very large studio here with a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you have things in galleries right now that are not sold and all this kind of stuff. So like trying to think about planning for the future of your estate, basically. So like, is this something you've ever thought about?
Like where my work's going to go?
Pretty much, yeah.
I have a handwritten list, and with my will, I do have a will just because I've had numerous people close to me die, and then it was like, I better have a will. And so I've talked to my daughter about this, and she knows who my good friends are, and they'll get first choice, and that's all. I don't have it willed to any other museum or anything like that. I'm fortunate that the Cameron Art Museum does have a couple of my pieces, and maybe they'd want something else, but I'm not counting on that.
I'm just wondering, it's just on my mind because of my own family issues and just the general state of the world with COVID and all this, like just thinking a lot about the future of how people will, artists will be perceived basically once they pass.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I feel very fortunate that the local university here was interested enough and saw my research. I worked with Anthony Jansen, Tony Jansen on that. He was my mentor for my senior project, and his father was H.W. Jansen that wrote The History of Art.
I was going to say, yeah, that's the history book, the Jansen book.
And so we were very fortunate to have Tony teach at the university here for a while. Brilliant, brilliant man, and he took me under his wing, and so he was my advisor for the project, the senior project. So it was basically Tony that got me in on that, and he's still alive. He lives in the Charleston area now.
All right, last little sort of tidbit thing would be basically from your life experiences, from your artistic career experiences, any advice for people who are coming up now and how to try to do it well?
It's a different world now. I don't know, because I don't even have a website right now. My website's down. So they need to advise me more than I need to advise them, I guess.
Yeah, you're not very good with social media either, are you?
No, I really don't like Facebook. I'm still on Facebook, and it's good for some things. And I'm on Instagram, and I started out being a real fan, and I like Instagram. I get on there probably every day, and because I follow a lot of people and galleries and museums, but I'm shy, I guess, about posting. I take pictures all the time of my work, and then it's like, I'm not going to put this up there.
It's tough. I mean, it's a bit of like, social media to me is a bit like cliques in high school kind of thing. Like there are the popular kids, there are the not popular kids, and like it's really hard to become a popular kid. But quite honestly, do you really want to be a popular kid?
Well, what I found is I'll take a picture, I'll post it, and then I get all worried, like, how many people are looking at this? Who's commenting? And then I got to get back on there to see. It just takes up too much time. I don't want to do that.
Well, it's not just time; it's emotional energy, like that you're investing in this thing that you would, quite honestly, we would rather invest in something else, like making a new piece of art.
Right. I'd rather work. I worked with an ecclesiastical artist in Philadelphia, PA, before I started the tile business with Kathy Ryan Lockwood in the Poconos, and he taught me a lot. I probably learned more from Marco than any like school or work situation, and he was pretty reclusive, and I don't know, I find myself kind of being that way, but he worked in stained glass, and ceramic tile and painting, and it was pretty much all ecclesiastical work, and as you know, all about that.
Yes, I'm sure you'd get along with my father beautifully.
I don't know. I guess there's just another way. Hopefully another way besides social media. I had a website, and the guy who did my website put my titles and dimensions on top of the piece. And it was, really? We need to go back and change this. And then he wanted to charge me an astronomical amount of money to go back and change it. And after I lost my domain name, I just let it go and figured if people want to find me, there's enough if you Google me out there. And I do have quite a bit on Instagram, but...
Okay, so back to it's unfortunate. You should get a little bit more of an internet presence. It is beneficial in many ways.
It is.
It's annoying in many other ways, but it is beneficial in some ways. But so some advice though, so from your experiences, it could be anything. It could be, I mean, you already said how much you loved residencies. You had some bad experiences with galleries, but I mean, any other sort of things along that line? Something that fascinates me is insurance. Do you keep like insurance on your studio?
I have homeowners insurance. I don't really have extra insurance for a lot. I have a pretty good high homeowners insurance. And
oh, well, you live in Hurricane Alley. You darn
yes,
well
we
better.
do. We have to have wind and hail and flood, But advice, it's unfortunate, like right now, we're still in COVID, but one thing is travel. Travel, get out of your state, get out of your country, and put a backpack on if you can, and search residencies. I just think there's so many great ones out there, international, and a lot of them are hard to find, but if you do your homework, and there's a lot more now on Instagram, hashtags are fabulous if you're interested in something, check out that hashtag, and there's a lot of residencies I've seen.
I remember, God, what was it, 20 years ago, I found a book of residencies just in France. And the book was like 200 pages thick of just artist residencies just in France. And they've blown up. I mean, they're all over the world now. Everybody loves to have an artist residency in their community or their country or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So travel more. Travel more.
And it is a different world with websites and galleries. I'm not even sure where that's going to go with the gallery situation now. I wish I was making more than 50% when I do turn my work over to a gallery. That's hard. 50%.
Is that a pet peeve of yours?
Pardon?
Is that a peeve of yours that you have to give over 50%?
I think it should be 60-40 anyways, because I know galleries have overhead and if they advertise and all this and that, but it's just like when you think about what you really want to charge, it's usually the full price and you're going to get half for what it is. Especially, I hate to say this, but in our area, there's not a big following of and promoting the arts and supporting the artists, supporting the local artists. That's guess what I want to say.
Oh yeah, no, I've said on previous podcasts that like any sort of tourist or sort of small town or quaint place, no matter where it is in the world, it's going to be tough to be there, but it's a great place to be an artist. So inexpensive living, slow lifestyle, easy, lots of space and time to sort of reflect and think and do all that stuff because you're not in a major metropolitan area, mm-hmm. which is marvelous. However, there are also not a lot of collectors or opportunities in those regions to be able to sustain your career. So you're sort of forced to leave your area in order to be able to maintain your career.
I'd say that's probably right. That the light around here is so beautiful. When I travel, I enjoy coming back to Wilmington. I really do. It's a good place to call home, and I have a good network of friends, and there are some really fabulous artists here, and a lot of young ones coming up.
Is your primary income at this point from your art sales?
No, not my primary income, no. I'd say half my income is from my art sales. The rest is investments.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You made some smart investments.
Yeah.
50% of your
Yeah.
income's coming
Yeah.
from that. Well, because I mean, to a certain extent, like I look around at your studio, you have this really beautiful place. I mean, it's quite an envious studio that most people
Thank
don't,
you.
know,
You're
it's
right.
quite luxurious. And so I often wonder, like, how can you afford to do this kind of thing?
Well, my husband, common law husband, was a small commercial builder.
So he built it for
Yeah.
cheap.
So we did a
He
lot
built it for
ourselves.
cost.
We
I
did
mean-
a lot ourselves, like seriously, spackle and the soffit outside, and we did a lot. So that, sure, not everybody could build a studio like this. Unfortunately, our piece of property here was big enough to do it. I put stakes in the yard, those little flags, that this is what I wanted, and I thought for sure he was gonna, say, okay, this is all. But he
I'm
said,
surprised
okay.
you could get it permitted.
Well, we did.
Okay, yeah, I mean, because I mean, your
It's
studio is
about
almost the size
1480.
of your house.
1,400 square feet, right? And my kiln room in the back too, which is not heated.
My house in Wilmington was only 700 square feet.
Well, I could live in here. I might do that someday, when my house gets too big to take care of.
Okay, fair enough.
No.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, the biggest problem in the art world is that specifically making a living, being able to afford whatever artistic lifestyle we all desire, we don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. It drives me nuts because, like the old joke of like, you get 10 bankers together, they talk about art. You get 10 artists together, they talk about money. Like, we want to talk about money, but we don't feel comfortable asking about it, like how do you afford this? How did you get this, whatever resource, material, how do you afford to keep your studios? Like I'm thinking, when people rent them out in the place, like people don't like talking about in the arts. They don't like talking about how people afford to do things.
Well, it's hard. I know if I didn't have some extra income, I know what I would be doing. I'm also a mold maker. I'd be making tile molds of lighthouses probably, and
seagulls.
Yeah, like beach things and selling them. But I don't want to do that. So fortunately, I don't have to.
Well, and that's the balancing act that we all sort of choose in our lives. Like how much of the sort of the things to make a living we do versus the things we do to sort of keep ourselves sane, through our artistic practice, and like how far are we willing to go one way or the other. I mean, I know a lot of people that will not do any sort of commercial product kind of stuff, and they live very modest lifestyles because they just won't do that work. And of course, I know many people who do a lot of that commercial stuff and they have lots of money, but they may not be satisfying their artistic sort of itch that they need.
Well, when I had the tile business in the Poconos, we did commercial work. That's what we did. And it ended up, not that we intentionally went in this direction, but it ended up being signs, ceramic tile signs. And we were doing these great big huge tiles and making molds for banks in eastern Pennsylvania. And then that was really torturous. I mean, we were making money, but we were also breaking our backs too. And I didn't want to do that. When I moved here, it was like, I'm done with that. So it was successful.
Well, but that goes back to the definition of success. And that's the part that I'm, still trying to figure out.
My advice is you've got to work hard. Don't give up. If, young artists, it's just like work, keep going. Yeah, we all make stuff we don't want anybody else to see. So either put it in the closet or burn it in the backyard and just keep going.
Or sell it and just don't put your name to it.
Or cut it up for collage. I think my artist friends have found our work in Ivy Cottage or, places like that. It's hysterical.
That's a local secondhand store.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.